The day my father erased my mother started with a wedding invitation. I remember holding that cream-colored card, its gold lettering burning into my retinas. Join us in celebrating the union of Cruz and Marley. My name is Whitney, and that was the beginning of watching my mother's memory being scrubbed away like a stain. 10 years later, karma finally caught up with him. The doorbell rang at 11 p.m. on a rainy Tuesday. I wasn't expecting anyone, especially not my father standing there, soaked and carrying a duffel bag that had seen better days. "Whitney," he said, his voice cracking, "I need your help." I stood in the doorway, letting the cold air rush past me. The last time we'd properly spoken was 3 years ago, at a coffee shop where he'd lectured me about living in the past, when I mentioned Mom. "Marley left," he continued, shifting his weight. She took everything. The house, the cars, my savings. I didn't know where else to go. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here was the man who had methodically removed every trace of my mother from our lives, now stripped bare himself. I thought about the boxes hidden in my attic, filled with Mom's belongings I'd rescued before they could be thrown away or donated. "Please, Whitney, just for a few days until I figure something out." I felt a familiar ache in my chest, the same one I'd carried since I was 13, watching him pack away Mom's photo albums. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. "The guest room's upstairs." He trudged past me, leaving wet footprints on my hardwood floor. The same floor Mom would have loved. She always wanted natural wood in her dream house. "Thank you," he mumbled, heading toward the stairs. "Dad," I called after him, my voice steady. "There are rules. This is my house, my space. You don't get to comment on my decorating choices or the things I keep." He nodded, shoulders slumped. "Of course." As I watched him climb the stairs, I thought about the treasures tucked away in my attic: Mom's journals, her favorite sweater, the music box he'd given her on their first anniversary, all the pieces of her he'd tried to erase, preserved like insects in amber, waiting for the right moment. I smiled to myself, a plan forming in my mind. He thought he was just seeking shelter, but he had no idea he was walking into a museum of everything he'd tried to forget. Sometimes karma needs a little help, and I was more than ready to be its willing assistant. My phone buzzed, a text from Hope. "You okay? Need backup?" "No," I typed back. "Everything's exactly where it needs to be." Morning came with the smell of coffee and awkward silence. Dad sat at my kitchen table, clutching his mug like a life preserver, while I leaned against the counter pretending to check my phone. "This is a nice place you've made for yourself," he said, eyes wandering around the room. "The windows remind me of—" He stopped abruptly, and I knew exactly what he was going to say. They reminded him of Mom's old art studio, with its wall-to-wall windows that let in streams of natural light. "Of what, Dad?" I pressed, watching him squirm. "Nothing," he mumbled, taking another sip of coffee. I opened a cabinet to grab my travel mug, and a photograph fluttered to the counter. Dad's eyes locked onto it immediately. Mom and me at the beach, her laugh frozen in time as she helped me build a sandcastle. I'd strategically placed it there the night before. His hand twitched, reaching for it before pulling back. I thought, I thought all these were gone. "Funny how things survive, isn't it?" I said, picking up the photo and studying it. "Like memories. They have a way of sticking around, even when people try to erase them." He stood up abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. "I should start looking for apartments today." "With what money?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "You said Marley took everything." "I'll figure something out," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Stay," I said, surprising myself with how easily the word came out. "At least until you get back on your feet." "But Dad?" I waited until he looked at me. "Don't touch anything in this house without asking. Don't move things. Don't throw things away. This isn't your space to reorganize. The implications hung heavy in the air between us, his face flushed with what might have been shame or anger. I couldn't tell which. I need to get to work, I said, grabbing my keys. Help yourself to whatever's in the fridge. Just remember what I said. At work, Hope cornered me by the coffee machine. So, how's Operation Karma going? He found the first photo this morning, I said, lowering my voice. You should have seen his face, Hope. Like he'd seen a ghost. Are you sure about this? She asked, concern creasing her forehead. Revenge isn't always the answer. This isn't just revenge, I replied, thinking about the boxes in my attic. It's justice, for Mom, for everything he tried to erase. When I got home that evening, I found Dad in the guest room, staring at the wall where I'd hung another photograph, Mom's graduation day, her smile radiant as she held her diploma. He didn't turn around when I passed by, but I could have sworn I heard him whisper, "I'm sorry." That weekend, I climbed into the attic while Dad was out job hunting. The cardboard boxes held a decade of memories, carefully preserved against his systematic erasure. I pulled out Mom's letters first, each one still in its original envelope, her flowing handwriting unchanged by time. "What are you doing up here?" I jumped, nearly dropping the bundle of letters. Dad stood at the attic entrance, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "I thought you were out," I said, not bothering to hide what I was holding. He stepped closer, eyes fixed on the boxes. "Are those everything you tried to throw away?" "Yes." I pulled out a letter and held it up. "Remember this one? Mom wrote it to you while she was in the hospital. The one where she asked you to make sure I never forgot her." His face went pale. "Whitney, you promised her," I continued, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. "You promised, and then you let Marley pack away every trace of her existence." "It wasn't that simple," he protested weakly. I scattered the letters across the floor between us. "Read them, all of them. Maybe then you'll understand what you really threw away." I left him there, surrounded by paper ghosts of my mother. Throughout the day, I heard him moving around upstairs, the occasional creak of floorboards marking his presence. Hope called around dinner time. "Have you checked on him?" "He's been up there for hours," I said, stirring a pot of pasta I wasn't hungry for. "Reading. And how do you feel?" Before I could answer, I heard footsteps on the stairs. "I'll call you back," I whispered, hanging up. Dad appeared in the kitchen doorway, holding a single letter. His eyes were red, his hands shaking slightly. "I found this one," he said, voice hoarse. "The last one she wrote." I knew which letter he meant without looking. Mom's final words, written when she knew she wouldn't make it home. "She knew," he said, sinking into a chair. "She knew Marley was already showing interest in me. She wrote about seeing us at the grocery store, how Marley touched my arm and laughed too loud at my jokes." My hand froze on the spoon. "What?" He placed the letter on the table, pushing it toward me. "There's more. Things about our marriage I never knew. Things she never told me." I picked up the letter with trembling fingers, scanning the familiar handwriting until I found the passage he meant. My breath caught as I read Mom's words. "There are things you need to know about our family, Cruz. Secrets I've kept too long." The letter slipped from my fingers, landing face down on the table. Whatever revenge I'd planned suddenly felt hollow compared to the weight of Mom's unspoken truth. Hope arrived with pizza and wine, finding me surrounded by scattered letters on the living room floor. Dad had retreated to his room, claiming a headache. "So, what's this big secret?" Hope asked, settling cross-legged beside me. "I don't know," I said, shuffling through the papers. "The letter ends there. It's like she ran out of time or someone interrupted her," Hope finished, reaching for a slice. "Have you checked the other boxes?" I shook my head. I can't stop thinking about what she meant. What secrets could have been so important? A floorboard creaked above us, and Hope lowered her voice. Maybe it's time to ask him directly. He's clearly suffering too, Whitney. Good, I snapped, then immediately felt ashamed. I mean, I don't know what I mean anymore. You know what your mom would say right now? I smiled despite myself. She'd tell me to stop being so stubborn and just talk to him. Dad's voice came from the doorway, making us both jump. He held Mom's old music box in his hands. I found this in the attic. Remember how she used to wind it up every night? The familiar melody of Moon River filled the room as he opened the lid. Something small and white fluttered to the floor. Another note, Hope whispered, but I was already reaching for it. My hands shook as I unfolded the paper. Mom's handwriting was messier here, more urgent. My dearest Cruz and Whitney, if you're reading this, you found the music box. There's something you both need to know. The key around my neck, the one I never took off, it opens more than just memories. Go to the old willow tree where we had our first picnic. Look for the heart carved in the trunk. All my love, Bianca. Dad's face had gone white. The key. I gave it to Marley. She wanted to wear it as a necklace. You what? I stood up so fast the wineglass toppled. That was Mom's. How could you? I know where Marley keeps it, he interrupted, running a hand through his gray hair. In her jewelry box at the country club. She works there now. Hope cleared her throat. I happen to know someone who works security there. We both turned to look at her. What? She shrugged. My brother Isaac could help. If you're serious about finding out what your mom wanted to tell you. I looked at Dad, seeing for the first time how the past decade had aged him. The anger that had fueled me for so long flickered, replaced by something else. Curiosity, maybe even hope. Well, I asked him, are you ready to find out what Mom was trying to tell us? He nodded slowly, still holding the music box. It's time we both face the truth, whatever it is. The country club's parking lot was nearly empty when Hope's brother Isaac met us by the service entrance. His security uniform gleamed under the street lights. You've got 15 minutes, he whispered, swiping his key card. The cleaning crew's on break. Dad shifted nervously. Maybe this isn't... Don't, I cut him off. You owe Mom this much. The employee area smelled of chlorine and cleaning products. Isaac led us to a row of lockers, stopping at one marked Weber M. She never changes the combination, he said, spinning the dial. It's her birthday. The locker door swung open with a metallic creak. Inside, a small jewelry box sat on top of a folded uniform. Dad reached for it with trembling hands. It's locked, he muttered, turning it over. Move, I said, pulling a bobby pin from my hair. Mom had taught me this trick when I was 12, after I'd locked myself out of my diary. The lock clicked open within seconds. There it was, Mom's key, hanging from a delicate silver chain. Dad lifted it carefully, as if it might crumble to dust. We need to go, Isaac urged, glancing at his watch. Now! Back in my car, Dad held the key up to the dome light. I remember the willow tree, he said softly. It was our first date. I carved our initials in the trunk. You never told me that, I said, starting the engine. There's a lot I never told you, Whitney. About your mom, about us. He trailed off, staring at the key. I was so angry after she died. Angry at her for leaving. Angry at myself for not seeing how sick she was getting. Marley, she made it easy to forget. But I didn't want to forget, I snapped, gripping the steering wheel tighter. I needed my mom's memory, and you took that away from me. I know, he whispered. God, I know. When Marley left, when I saw what she'd done to me, I finally understood what I'd done to you. We pulled up to the park. The willow tree stood exactly as I remembered it, its branches swaying in the night breeze. Dad walked straight to the trunk, fingers tracing the bark until he found it, a heart with faded initials inside. Here, he said, voice cracking. The bark's different here, like something's behind it. I pressed the key into his hand. Then let's find out what Mom wanted us to know. He inserted the key into a nearly invisible hole in the trunk. Something clicked, and a small panel swung open, revealing a metal box wedged into the hollow of the tree. Whitney, Dad breathed, pulling out the box. Look at the engraving. In Mom's handwriting, the truth sets us free, but love keeps us whole. We sat beneath the willow tree, the metal box between us. Dad's hands shook as he turned the key in the lock. Inside lay a leather-bound journal and a stack of photographs I'd never seen before. These are from before we met, Dad said, picking up the first photo, his face drained of color. That's, that's my brother Robert. Uncle Robert? The one who died before I was born? Dad nodded slowly. With your mom. They're together in this picture. I snatched the photo. Mom looked young, maybe 20, smiling at the camera, while a man who looked strikingly like my father had his arm around her waist. Read the journal, I whispered, unable to take my eyes off the photo. Dad opened to the first page, his voice trembling as he read aloud. Dearest Cruz, if you're reading this, you need to know the truth about Robert and me. We were engaged before I met you. When he died in that car accident, I was devastated. Then I met you at his funeral. You looked so much like him, and you were so kind to me. Stop, I said, but Dad continued reading. I fell in love with you, Cruz. Real love, different from what I had with Robert. But I've carried this guilt for years. Robert and I had a fight the night he died. He was driving angry because of me. I never told you because I was afraid you'd hate me, afraid you'd think I only loved you because you reminded me of him. Dad's voice cracked. He flipped through more pages, photographs spilling onto the grass. Mom with Uncle Robert. Mom at parties I'd never seen pictures of. Mom looking young and carefree. There's more, he said, reading silently before looking up at me. Whitney, she writes here about why she kept her illness secret at the end. She had the same condition that killed Robert. She was afraid to tell me, afraid I'd fall apart like I did when I lost my brother. I grabbed the journal, scanning until I found the last entry. My darling family, I'm sorry for the secrets. The doctors say I don't have much time left. Cruz, please don't let my mistakes poison our memories. And Whitney, my beautiful girl, help your father remember the love, not the loss. The key around my neck was Robert's once. Now it's opened our last secret. Let it open your hearts too. All my love, always, Mom. Dad buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. I stared at the photos scattered around us. Mom's hidden past, her secret pain, her final wish for us to heal. Dad, I said softly, reaching for his hand, I think, I think it's time we both stopped running from her memory. He squeezed my hand, and together we sat under the willow tree, surrounded by the truth Mom had waited so long to share. The next morning, I found Dad in the attic again, surrounded by Mom's belongings. He held her old paint-stained apron, running his thumb over the dried watercolor splotches. I remember the day she got this, he said as I sat beside him. Robert had just died, and she started painting to cope. I watched her create the most beautiful landscapes, each one darker than the last, until finally, he pulled out a canvas I'd never seen before. This was her last piece. The painting showed two men, nearly identical, standing beneath a willow tree. One was solid, the other translucent, like a ghost. She painted this the week before we got married, Dad whispered. I was so angry when I saw it. I thought, I thought she was still choosing him over me. But she chose you, I said, touching the canvas. She loved you differently, but she chose you. And I repaid that love by erasing her. His voice cracked. Whitney, I am so sorry. When Marley suggested packing away your mom's things, I thought it would help us move forward. Instead, I just taught you that love could be packed away and forgotten. I pulled out Mom's journal again, opening to a page I'd memorized last night. Listen to this. My greatest fear isn't dying. It's that Cruz will blame himself, that Whitney will carry this pain alone. Love isn't a replacement part. You don't swap out one for another. You just make room for more. Dad's hands trembled as he reached for the journal. I never made room. I just replaced. And how did that work out? I asked, gentler than I'd intended. Marley, he sighed. She wanted everything to be about her. New furniture, new photos, new memories. I let her erase your mother because I was too weak to face the pain. I stood up, walking to the furthest corner of the attic. Behind an old dresser, I pulled out a large wrapped canvas. Mom painted this too, I said, carefully removing the protective covering. I found it hidden in her studio after everything. The painting showed the three of us, Mom, Dad, and me, sitting beneath the willow tree. In the background, barely visible, stood Uncle Robert's ghostly figure, smiling down at us. She called it Family Past and Present, I said, watching Dad's face crumple. The date on the back. It's the day before she died. Dad reached out, touching the painted figures with shaking fingers. All this time, he whispered, she was trying to tell us that it was okay to remember, to love, to grieve, all of it. Maybe, I said, sitting back down beside him. It's not too late for us to learn that lesson. Hope helped us hang Mom's paintings throughout the house, each one finding its perfect spot. The family portrait went above the fireplace, while the willow tree scene took center stage in the living room. Your mom would love this, Hope said, stepping back to admire our work. Dad emerged from the kitchen with coffee. She always wanted her art displayed properly. I remember how she'd spend hours getting the lighting just right. The doorbell rang. I opened it to find Marley, her perfectly manicured hands clutching her designer purse. I heard Cruz was staying here, she said, trying to peer past me. I came to discuss our divorce settlement. Before I could respond, Dad appeared beside me. Whatever you're offering, Marley, the answer is no. Keep the house, keep the money. I have everything I need right here. Her eyes widened as she took in the paintings behind us. You're hanging up dead people's art now? How morbid. That's my mom you're talking about, I said, stepping forward. And she's more alive in this house than you ever were. Marley's face flushed. Cruz, surely you're not choosing this over what we had? Dad smiled, and for the first time in years, I saw the man Mom had fallen in love with. I'm choosing to remember, Marley. I'm choosing my family. After she stormed off, we sat in the living room, Mom's presence surrounding us in every brushstroke on the walls. I found this in her journal, I said, pulling out a folded paper. It's a letter to both of us, dated the day she died. Dad nodded for me to read it. My loves, by now you know about Robert, about my fears and my illness. But there's one more thing you need to know. You two were the best thing that ever happened to me. Cruz, you weren't a replacement for Robert. You were my second chance at love, different and perfect in your own way. Whitney, you were the piece of my heart I never knew was missing. Please don't let grief or anger keep you from loving each other. Family isn't just blood and memories. It's forgiveness and growth, too. Love always, Mom. Dad reached for my hand. I don't deserve your forgiveness, Whitney. Maybe not, I said, squeezing his hand. But Mom wanted us to try, and I'm tired of letting anger win. Through the window, the setting sun cast long shadows across Mom's paintings, making the colors dance and shift. In that moment, I could almost hear her laugh, could almost feel her presence in the room with us. So, Dad said softly, "Where do we go from here?" I looked at the family portrait, at the way Mom had painted us all connected, past and present intertwined. "We remember," I said, "and we make new memories together."